The God problem. Buddhism had gained ascendancy in India without exterminating the more ancient creeds, and there were many devoutly religious people who had only a vague notion of the contrast in which it stood to other forms of faith. The spiritual atmosphere in which Charaka had grown up consisted of a mixture of all the thoughts, influences, and opinions then entertained in India. But while the northern gods that had been worshipped by the ancestors of the invaders in their former houses had faded from the mental vision of the present generation, the ancient deities of India had not gained full recognition. Vishnu, Shiva, and Indra appeared to them as the patrons of conquered races and were therefore deemed of inferior power. Well, if you get beyond the personifications and stuff, it's like Yahweh. If you think of Yahweh as some Israelite deity and stuff like this, but if you understand that Yahweh is a term used for ancient Egyptian and other northeastern African entities before the Israelites existed, then you kind of understand that too. If Vishnu is not Vishnu, Shiva, and Indra and Brahma are not the images that you see, but names for divinity, like Indra being the Lord of heaven and Shiva being of death and destruction and all that, and Vishnu being of preservation and Brahma being the creator, all that. You can think of that without them being separate entities and all the rest of it. But anyways, among the better educated Hindu people, philosophical ideas were spreading, and Brahma was revered as the supreme being, the great, the omnipotent, the omnipresent, as the all-conscious and all-perfection, the creator, the fashioner, the ruler of the universe, and the all-father of all beings. Some of these terms are broader than that, like Abba and Amma and stuff like this. They're not just father and mother, and a god's beyond that gender stuff. But anyways, with this God idea of an all-embracing personal deity, Charaka had become familiar almost from childhood, and he was greatly astonished not to hear a word about God, the Lord, or Brahma in his religious instructions. Buddha was spoken of as the teacher of gods and men. Well, teacher, the sent ones, the avatars, are teachers of the male and female things that people consider to be gods and goddesses. You know, the jinn, the Malaka are certainly on their side, and if they're can grant the request, but they don't in ways that humans don't, because that's a different side thing. But they're not. But he's not a Devi, and you know all that stuff. But he was worshipped with a reverence which was peculiar to him. But the belief in the ancient entities was not disturbed. Their existence was neither denied nor affirmed. Well, wasn't there that one passage he didn't worship the males and the females and stuff, but he worshiped God beyond that or something? But there was no detail about his worship. Again, Buddha yoga became Buddhism, so they removed sort of the yoga aspect of it. Well, I mean, some details that would have made it yoga and made it sort of a spiritual but not religious sort of thing. So long as he was unacquainted with his new surroundings, Charaka did not dare to ask questions. But when he began to know his kind-hearted elder, Subhuti, and some others of the monks, he grew more assured. And one day, while several brothers were seated at the portico of the assembly hall, he ventured to inquire as to the doctrine concerning God. Life is taken seriously in a Buddhist monastery, and the tone of conversation is always religious and considerate. Nevertheless, there were never missing among the brethren men of a lighter temper, who saw the humor of things, could smile, and smiling point out the comical features of life, so as to make their fellow brethren smile too. For real laughter was seldom, or never, heard in the precincts of the cloister. Well, we shouldn't lie or make abuses as part of our humor. But we find frequent traces of this humor in the wall paintings as well as the legends of saints, part of which are preserved even today. Now, when Charaka spoke of God, one of the brethren, Kavadda by name, a healthy-looking man of medium size and of radiant face, drew near and asked, "What do you mean, Indra, the thunderer, the soma-intoxicated braggart, hero, and ruler of the second heaven, whom people call Sakra or Basava? Or do you mean Shiva, the powerful and terrible one, decked with a necklace of skulls, the god full of awe and majesty? Perhaps you mean Vishnu in any of his avatars as a fish or a wild boar or a white horse." Charaka shook his head, and Kavadda continued, "May you mean Krishna, the avatar of love, who danced with all the shepherdesses at once, finding an appropriate incarnation in their favorite swings, while each girl imagined that she alone held the god in her arms." Yeah, I don't know what they mean by gods, but this is translation. But my question refers to no one of the gods, replied the novice, but the God. And to emphasize, so it's not the Devis, it's not the Asuras, it's something else. Bhagavan, or whatever word we use. And the emphasis with which he marked the difference showed he had felt, not like joking on a problem, which was of grave importance to him. "Ah, I see," exclaimed Kavadda, his lip curled with sarcasm, and there was a twinkle of triumph in his eye, for the topic under discussion reminded him of a contest which he had with a Brahmin priest, in which his antagonist had been completely worsted by his superior skill in pointing out the weak side of the proposition and holding it up to ridicule. "Ah, I see," he exclaimed. "You do not mean any one of the several gods, but God in general. You are like the man who sent his servant to market to buy fruit. When the latter returned with bananas, mangoes, grapes, and an assortment of other fruit, he upbraided him, saying, 'I do not want bananas, nor mangoes, nor grapes, nor pears, nor prunes, nor apples, nor pomegranates. I want fruit. Fruit I want. Fruit pure and undefiled. Not a particular fruit, but fruit in general,' said Charaka. 'Are you a wrangler, famous in the art of dialectics, and you know not the difference between God and the gods? I love God, but I hate the gods.' 'Is it possible,' cried Kavadda with a sarcastic chuckle, 'you hate the gods and you love God? How can you hate all the single men, monks, and laymen, traders, warriors, kings, noblemen, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Shudras, and love man in general? How is it that you can hate the gods and love God? Does not the general include the particular? Well, just because it's not something to treat as a god doesn't mean that it's something you should hate either. So be so good, Reverend Sir, answered the novice, who began to chafe under the attacks of the brisk monk, to understand what I mean. The world in which we live is a world of order, and we know that there are laws to which we must submit. When I speak of God, I mean him who made us, the omnipotent creator of the universe, the father of all beings, the standard of all perfection, the eternal law of life. Well, replied Kavadda, who thought boisterous was at the bottom of his heart, good-natured. I do not mean to offend. I try to drive a truth home to you in the guise of fun. The truth is serious, though my mode of expression may be humorous. I understand now that you are devoted to the great all-God, Brahma, as the Brahmins call him, the Lord, creator and ruler of the universe. But did you ever consider two things? First, that such an all-God conceived as a being that has a name and form is the product of our own imagination, as much as are all the other deities of the people? And secondly, Brahma were as real as you are and I am, it would be of no avail. Every one must find the path of salvation himself, and Brahma's wisdom is not your wisdom, nor can Brahma, who resides in the Brahma heaven, teach you anything. Oh, that's overstating it too, but there's actually an opposite in human history, is that we come up with more and more limited forms as time goes on, but rather than Charaka did not conceal his dissatisfaction with Kavadha's notion of God and said, the mere idea that there is a God gives me strength. He may be directly unapproachable, or may surround us as the air or as the ether which penetrates our bodies. He may be different from what we surmise him to be, but he must exist as the cause of all that is good and wise and true and beautiful. How shall I, in my endeavors, seek the truth, succeed if there be no eternal standard of truth? Yes, I know, replied Kavadha, with undisguised condescension. It will help a youth who pursues an ideal to think of it as a being, as a God, as the great God, as the greatest God of all. Children need toys and the immature need gods. Your case reminds me of a story which was told me when I, in my younger years, went out, not unlike you, in search of truth. Tell us the story, exclaimed one of the younger brethren. And Kavadha said, if I were sure not to hurt the feelings of our young friend, the novice, I should be glad to tell the story, but seeing he is a worshipper of Brahma, I'd better let the matter drop. Charaka answered, I'm not a worshipper of Brahma unless you understand by Brahma the first cause of the all, the ultimate reasoning of existence, as the supreme being, the perceiver of all things, the controller, Lord, the maker, the fashioner, the chief, the victor, the ruler, the father of all beings, who ever have been and are to be. If your story be instructive, I'm anxious to hear it myself, even though it should criticize my belief. All further discussion ceased when Kavadha showed his readiness to tell the story.